Good morning to you all. Very good morning. Uh, let me. So, thank you very much for this very long introduction. I thought that was longer than my speech. Going to be. I was wishing when it gets over. Uh, but I'm truly very happy to be here, both in my personal capacity and also as someone representing the organization International Center for Research on Women. Uh, the ICRW, as it is popularly known, is an organization which is headquartered in Washington D.C., but we have offices in Uganda, in Africa, and in New Delhi for the Asia region. So when we began the conversation of collaborating or some kind of partnership, we were a bit curious as to see what this organization does and how these conferences are organized, and we were really pleased to see the thoughts of this, the philosophy behind doing these meetings and bringing the new, fresh, groups of people like you all. Many of them I see as students doing research and engaging on these difficult issues. I think this is one of the most difficult issues that we are currently engaged with. So from that perspective, we at ICRW felt very happy to associate ourselves with this event, and hopefully we would continue to have our association as we move on. And at some point, maybe we'll do it in India, this conference, as a regional one. And no, because I see a lot of regional people here and representation, so that will be really great. So let me again congratulate you, the International Institute for Knowledge Management, for organizing this third World Conference on Women's Studies 2017. I know the previous two conferences have brought out a lot of insights, and I hope that this conference also next 3 days would bring a lot of issues that we on issues of women's empowerment, the sensitive and delicate issues that we have often not discussed upfront into the fore, and we would see what more could be done on some of those issues. And I was just talking to some of the some of the presenters, and I was pleased to hear some of the topics that are going to be presented next 3 days. They are extremely, extremely contemporary and very topical. So I really congratulate you for having organized this and for being able to bring together this kind of discourse into the center stage and the people. I think that this is important because my sense is that this conference could not have come at more appropriate juncture when we are witnessing critical social, political, economic, demographic and health transitions both globally and nationally. The intersections of these various precarious transitions and the vulnerabilities that they create, especially for women and the weaker sections of the society, and their implications are something that we must fully comprehend and address within a comprehensive framework. Rife with socio-cultural conflicts, radicalism, and political turmoil, stricken with conflict and violence, we are faced by some of the most challenging times in human history now. That's what I believe. What is striking is that these transitions have also been marked by increased violence against girls and women, retrenchment in reproductive and sexual rights, reassertion of patriarchal ideologies of family, retrenchments of associated gender roles that create the hierarchies and entitlement. So the entire shift towards the ideologies that are into a space where the discourses on equality and equity has become almost secondary or marginalized is a matter of worry, because it is a matter of concern, especially for women and children, and especially those women and children who come from very marginalized communities, excluded communities. I think there's nothing more relevant as the idea of social inclusion now as it was before. I think we must really discuss the issue of social exclusion and inclusion in far more threadbare manner. So while the world over we try to achieve social justice and equality to overcome social, cultural, political and economic clashes, it is important to mainstream concerns of gender within this framework. and ensure that justice and equality are accessible and applicable to all without discrimination. Since I come from an organization which works largely on from a programmatic and policy perspective, I would not go into the theoretical realm of the issues that we have in mind. I think I see a lot of them would come in the course of these 3-day discussions. I thought I'll contain myself to learning that we have drawn or we have generated over the years by working with the programs and see what works on some of these issues. Now I know this is limiting in some ways for us as an organization, and I have personally believed that empowerment is not a goal. And I just quote Srilata Bhattiwala, who says that, and this is what defines the empowerment, in my views, that empowerment is really not a goal, but it is a foundational process that enables women to construct their own political agendas and form movements and struggle for achieving fundamental and lasting transformation in gender and social power struggles. If this is the perspective, then we are looking at not just the outcome at any given point in time, but looking at the processes that is leading. I think the processes are far more important and has far more serious implications than what we think we have achieved. And I think this is an important point right in the beginning, to say it right in the beginning, because most programs that I'm going to talk about or draw my learning are very outcome oriented. In the era of gender equality, we have confined ourselves to measuring certain outcomes. And very often we draw satisfactions if we see that there is if there is an increase in education level, if there is an increase in workforce participation by women, if there is a gender gap diminishing between women in the labor force versus men, and we think that's a good thing. But we have to take a step back and see what does it mean. And that's what my intention is to draw your attention to. In this particular discourse on gender equality, I think we must keep in mind that gender equality is a struggle. It's a political idea, in fact. Equality between two unequals does not come without fighting for it. I think those who are in powers don't give away powers very easily. I think I can say it with conviction that, and history says this, the evidence will bear this out, that whenever two unequals negotiate the idea of equality, it is never ever a smooth conversation. It's never ever a seamless conversation. There are many confounding and diffusing elements that come in to make sure that the gender balance, the power imbalance remains the way they were. So patriarchy has its own ways of coming back and reestablishing itself in the past. So that's what I just wanted to. But then at the same time, we have to begin somewhere. So we begin with something that is low-hanging, which is that we must immediately address. For example, in South Asian countries face severe challenges in gender equality that curtail their progress in human development across all regions and groups. So if you look at the Gender Development Index of UNDP recent, for the South Asian countries where we reside and we work, the value for women is 17.8% lower than the value for men. Or if you look at the Gender Development Index for countries, it's about 0.520, which is a troubling statistics actually, the gap between genders on many of the measurable outcomes. We continue to see the trends of son preference, differential allocation and access to resources, gender politics of food, early and forced marriages, unemployment and disadvantageous working conditions that plague women and girls in this part of the world a lot. Of course, we have seen Sri Lanka moving forward. I must really put it up front that Sri Lanka's sex ratio is so encouraging to see. And there is a lot of emphasis within Sri Lankan development plan to put the gender into the center stage. But that's one part of the story. We know that in like many other countries in this region, everywhere there is an issue of inequality. And in that context, the strong global political support for sustainable development goals, SDGs, really, and which includes gender equality as a standalone goal, which is very important. The goal 5 of SDG is standalone as a requirement for achieving many other SDGs also, is an unprecedented opportunity for all of us. In fact, we have. So I just wanted to make sure that we use the opportunity of SDGs and bring the discourse of gender equality, but put the discourse from the perspective of a process. Now, coming back to my point, that what is it that I'm trying to draw from the learning? There are four learning that I think I draw from many studies and many programs that we have been working with on the issues of promoting gender equality. The first is that it is high time we invest into the adolescent girls within an institutional framework. 2, the adolescent girls must be supported for higher economic aspirations, resourcefulness, and employability, not the vocational skills. 3, gender equality will not be a reality unless notions of masculinity are challenged and transformed. And 4, when I say 3, 4, or 2 points, there are many others that could come in, but I think these 4 points are something that have always stood up whenever I have begun to work in this area. The 4th point is that comprehensive programming must be the new norm to address structural drivers of inequality and equity. So now let me take one by one, because the adolescent girls and working with adolescent girls within the institutional framework is so critical. We have seen how within the family institution, and especially within the schools and educational institutions, the gender hierarchy is re-established, or gender relations are established. How gendered are the spaces, educational spaces, especially when you go to primary, secondary schools. We think that is the age. Adolescent is the age where it does not belong to any group, and as a result, they keep falling off from the radar of development. And as a result, the girls are forced to relinquish basic human rights to education. The attrition, we know primary education level has gone up, but attrition at the secondary level is huge, even in Sri Lanka. Health and freedom of expression, when in many low to middle income communities they are married off without even their consent. The child marriages or marriages of the adolescent girls in some part of India is more than 60 to 70%. In fact, some of the districts it's almost 85-90% girls who just get married off below 8. There has been a decline in child marriage overall. It used to be 47 to 48% in 2001 or 2. Now in India, it has come down to about 26-27%, but that's an all India statistic. If you go down and see the districts and see some of the communities, then it's alarming the number of girls below age 18 who get married, who are just pushed out of the schools and they just get married. A large number of those girls, in fact, neither work and nor get married if they don't get married for one reason or the other. Nor study and nor work. So you see, they're just sitting at home. They're waiting to get married. Or they are just trafficked in for one or the other reasons to get into domestic, maid work, or they move out on the name of marriage. So we have seen the statistics also tell us, Asian region, that girls under the age of 20 have double the risk of dying in childbirth and almost 5 times more than their counterparts in the age of 20. So there's tremendous risk. So in deeply patriarchal societies, girls have less access to sexual health information, are less likely than boys to use contraception. In some parts of India, I said it's almost impossible for them to, and in many parts of the South Asian other countries that we work with. So very recently, I think last week issue, if you see this, Lancet had published a major article, and I think I would really recommend all of you must see, is on investing into adolescent girls. And it has, the authors there have worked out the benefit to cost ratios. And the article argues and presents solid evidence and solid arguments about what is the benefit to cost ratios if you invest into 5 areas of adults and girls. And it's enormous, not only during the period that you invest, but far beyond the time you invest, there is a return that the nation, the country, the communities reap as a result of those investments. I think first time we have seen a very strong an exercise or a strong argument in favor of investing into adolescents. We have, and I'll come to this when we talk about the comprehensive programming, how we have ignored the complete area of the entire adolescent space of women and girls, of girls. And within the adolescent sector, my belief is that schools are the primary institution that we should work. And the review of many work that I have seen within the school-based work is very interesting, very fascinating. Why? Because some of the good work within the schools, some of the work that have focused on the issues of gender equality and violence prevention within the schools, I'm talking about in this part of the world, they demonstrate that the girls and boys who are exposed to those programs do show some of the changes in their attitudes. But if you track those boys, there's a young life study of which is tracking the young children for last about 15 years. So they have grown from 10, now they're about 25 years now. And there are many studies like GEMS, Gender Equality Movement in School, which has tracked children over a period of 7 or 8 years. We have seen that attitudes are so deeply entrenched that they're very difficult to change, despite the programs. And that's what I want to put up front. For example, I listed a few of the attitudes that are easy to change and some of the attitudes that don't change despite severe programs. For example, it's easy or not so easy, but it is perhaps doable to talk about issues around women's and men's role when it comes to taking care of house and children. So we have seen a shift in the attitudes of young children on this particular point, that women should take care of house and children more important than their career. Taking care of home and children is far more important than career. This attitude is changing across generation. But girls should be allowed to decide when they want to marry. You find the complete split. You see the change in the attitudes, traditional view that man is the head of the family and responsible for providing economically for the family is still correct. That is changing because they see women have begun to work. But, and this is important, but the attitude that violence against women is acceptable in some situation is not changing. So many of those, even young children from 15, 16, 17 and beyond that, seem to be split on the idea that violence, there should be zero tolerance to violence. They think that violence is something that is essential to control girls and women for one or the other reasons, and they justify it. And that's worrisome. In fact, there are very few programs on violence prevention at an early age, and that's why I think the idea of working with masculinity is so important. And this attitude is far more difficult to change for boys more than girls, in fact. So we have seen boys who become politically correct in these programs at some point and say, yes, no, girls should also work like boys and men. Women should also earn equal amount of money that boys and men do. They should also, go out and things like that. But they need to be controlled. So they say they need to be controlled for a variety of reasons that they mention. So that's where I think that it's a struggle. Even at the early age, if you see boys demonstrating this kind of a desire to control is amazing. I as a man have grown up and in families which is male dominated, and I've seen how men and boys have taken in our societies the whole idea of control for granted, so normalized. It's done in a manner that nobody even would realize that we are controlling. The mannerism, all the manners, the language, everything is framed around ensuring that who is in control. So, and the International Men and Gender Equality Survey, I think one of the first and one of the most unique surveys that was that has been done recently, shows how early childhood experiences and the boys who go through the experience of father beating mother or violent families or they witness violence around them determines their lifetime action against anyone that will interact, especially the women and girls, their girlfriends, their partners. So they, when it comes to the brass tacks, they would fall back onto the model that they have seen in the family while growing up, kind of. So that is one. Now coming to the second point, which I said, that adults and girls should begin. Can I get water, please? See. Most programs, as I said, on gender disparities are under-resourced. We have seen everywhere. And I don't want to, you have to just look at that article and see yourself that these programs are not only under-resourced, but most programs on economic empowerment for women and girls tend to perpetuate the traditional and feminine role of it. So you see a lot of vocational skill programs on the name of economic empowerment that tend to give the training on stitching or weaving. There's something that women like to do and it's easy for them to do. So, and I think there's a macroeconomic, the shift from the economy to household economy has also put women into the disadvantage, because it has really put them into a space where they're seen doing the household work, which is natural to them, which is non-monetized, and they're contributing to the overall economy, but not counted at all, not valued for that. So that's why the point that I'm making, that it's so important that we move beyond the usual rhetoric of economic empowerment for women and girls to the idea of employability, where we generate the aspirations among the adolescent girls, and I'm again going back to young girls and women, that they are an economic entity. They can aspire to do things that, and they're able to do things that even boys and men do. So their aspirations have to shift from being just economically productive to being a resourceful person. And that resourcefulness has a very different dimension than being economically earning member. We have seen I have seen at least many programs that I have been associated with on self-help groups in a microfinance kind of approach, where women have been doubly exploited because they earn and then they also work for the family and home. So we have only a couple of programs. I was scanning in this region where there are programs that generates that kind of girls' employability aspirations, the economic entity aspirations, coupled with the usual empowerment aspect. So there are two domains. One is the agency and voice, and the other is to believe in oneself as an economic entity. And I definitely think these two need to come together. We often believe that agency and voices would lead to the other. It's not true. Because a lot of the agency and voices type of programs have led to a situation where women have accepted the current situation and said, this is my choice. In Delhi, about 40% women, working women, professional women, drop out of the workforce. The most recent statistic, Delhi is one place where the attrition among the professional, educated working women is highest among many cities in India. And many of these women would say that I have dropped out of the workforce out of my choice, because I think I cannot do justice to these two roles, and I am doing much better in terms of if the man is earning, it's fine. They say it seamlessly. So the whole idea of creating an alternative to marriage, and I'm saying it with full consciousness that look, marriage is not the thing that men don't aspire only for the marriage. The gender equality issue, I think, as an institution which really puts women, and I don't have to say this, I'm sure that all of you are, if you are reading and looking at the literature on feminism and the struggle, you would see how some of these institutions have put institutionalized ways of putting women into a space where they always remain secondary to institutions. So, from that point of view, I do not see many programs that start breaking this barrier, except few that we are seeing. And those programs are fairly encouraging because they seem to suggest that that the girls and women who are participating in these programs would aspire differently, would go out, negotiate. We have seen negotiate with their parents not to marry and continue into the education. So dropout goes down. They aspire for different skill sets. There are many girls in these schools where the programs I have seen of employability happening, they have gone out and sought skills from outside schools on their own because they don't want to just do the sewing and stitching, they want to do something else. So they have that kind of agencies need to be created in these programs. Now, and the third point, and I'm reiterating, I've already said, is about men and boys. We have seen that we need to engage, we need to look at men. Morning when Professor Fox said that we don't have to look at men only as yet another stakeholder. They are also the comrade. You have to see them as comrades, actually. I really like that word because if men don't see that in this power game they are also the losers, then the equality will not happen. Some of the studies that we have done among the migrant men really shows the struggle of men in meeting the role of being provider and protector. In Delhi, we see in Wazirpur ethnographic study we did among men and boys, young boys and men who are working in very hazardous industry and where they work on the steel rolls, and then many men die in that because that's very dangerous. But they don't leave that job. They don't go back there. So I have a quote from which is so moving. So one of the boy who was terrified, he was telling his friend that, look, I want to go back to my village because yesterday Ram Khilawan, another friend of his, he died while doing that steel rolling. It hit him and then he just killed. The other friends told him that, no, you just cannot go back. What will you do at home? You are a man. You need, this is what we are supposed to do. And it is said in a manner where there is absolutely no scope for counter argument. There's no other space. There's no other model for them. So I have seen in West Bengal and in many states where the dropout among boys is also as high, in fact much higher than girls from the school because they are pushed into the child labor or earning for the family. And they come to places like Delhi and big cities and the construction work. They are the young boys who can really, they're supple, they can move around onto the tall buildings and paint from outside, and they keep falling and dying. But there is literally no recognition of this because boys and men are supposed to be dying for providing purposes, supposed to be fighting for somebody else's pride. We have seen a lot of these men, for them the violence is so normalized that one can't even imagine the language that they use to justify their own existence of violence. So, and that needs to be broken at a very early age. So and that's why I think that's what they say, that we need to continue to control women because they also control others for doing this. So the whole idea of entitlement and control is so embedded in the mindset of men right from the beginning that needs to be challenged very early and continue to be challenged. All right. So, and coming to the last point of what I think is important and missing in this entire effort is that that we have very few programs that are comprehensive. And why they are not comprehensive? I think there are three reasons for which they are not comprehensive. One is that on the face of gender mainstreaming, the argument that goes of gender mainstreaming has really isolated gender from the discourse. It's nobody's baby. No, in sectoral programs, we have seen that everybody talks about gender equality. Everybody talks about every sector, health and education and panchayat raj, or women's development, rural development. Everyone says that we are doing women's development. That mainstreaming has not allowed to assess or measure if there is a cross-cutting intersection between these efforts and promoting gender equality or not. In what way one program is helping or complementing others. So we don't have a standalone agenda of gender equality for the development planners as such. Now SDG has, the goal 5 has come, but one has to really see how it gets translated into the sectoral plans or in the national and state level plans. It's not so easy because this is where the convergence needs to come into force, where structures have to be created, resources have to be put behind the idea of achieving gender equality, cutting across different sectors, and measure the process. So that's one. Second reason I think why it has not happened is most programming and most efforts have remained rhetorical is because, truly speaking, at local level there is no really data on women, on girls and boys that would allow the contextual and locally relevant programming and feedback into the programming. So my sense is that if we have to move forward with this agenda of achieving SDG 5 and do a comprehensive programming, we must seriously begin to think from generating the data pieces and data points at some level of disaggregation that would allow the gender planning at that level and allow the connection across different sectors. And three, I think there is, and that's important in my view, and that is there are very few programs, and when I was scanning, that really allow the policymakers to take those programs and scale, learn from this. We don't have enough programs that tell us that how do you scale this kind of a program on a scale, working at scale. There are many of us are working in smaller pockets with fewer groups, but we have not yet developed the models or the pilots that could be scaled. So, and in the manner, in the language, with the tools and technologies that would allow the government and national plans to really scale that up. So all the 3 points, the perspective, the lack of data, and the non-availability of scalable ideas and pilots have not. And these days what we see is whatever is scalable and in the name of ITCs and information technology has worked against development, because we have seen misuse of technologies and especially the social media, how they have reinforced the gender stereotypes through lots of. I see on WhatsApp messages much more than ever the sexist messages than ever before. Even in the close groups, people make funs and jokes as if this is normal about women and girls, and everyone participating in that. So I think the misuse of social media in my view, has done far more damage to gender issues than anything else. So we have to find ways to counter the new scaled ways of addressing these issues. I don't know how does one do it, but this is important. So I would like to just end by saying that because I come from a research background, I work within with the program and policies from the perspective of giving them tools and methods and instruments so that they don't stand back and say, look, this is all theoretical and rhetorical. I think it's important that tracking as part of the evidence building is very important for these many different ideas and programs and movements, even movements. We are working with women's collectives. Women's collectives for many years have not taken on themselves the issue of violence against women. We did major study of governance, women in governance across 3 countries, Nepal, India and Pakistan. And we've seen that the self-help groups or the women's in panchayat, the institutions, have not taken on the issue of violence as a matter of their strategic issue to be addressed, because they still consider violence as a personal, private issue and not something that should be discussed in the public domain. And at that micro level where the women collectives work, it's almost, this is not to be discussed in the public forum, because everybody knows everyone. So domestic violence never gets discussed into those forums. So, but then some of them have begun. Mahila mandals, for example, Mahila panchayats have come, and there are Mahila Gram Sabhas in India, for example. They are experimenting in many different states, and we have to see how the women groups which are at the village level bring these discourses at the village community, and then start influencing the panchayats, the councils, in a way, because they are sitting, almost 30 to 50% even sitting in those councils. But how do you take this discourse of violence and inequity through this pathway has not been experimented or even tracked if they have been experimented. So we need to look at these opportunities beyond the conventional one that we do within educational and others, because I think if gender equality has to come, it has to come through struggle, as I said, and there is no other way other than women's collectives and women forums coming together and making this as an issue and experimenting this. So, and in that, I think there should be 2 different levels of tracking it, in the short run and in the long run. Because most of us who feel very happy with some of these programs that happen need to really see what has happened in the short run and how these different pathways that we think are part of the theory of change, are folding out in the long run for those women. The women who have gone into the workforce, have started earning, have they really begun to assert themselves in the manner that you think they should be, as a matter of equality, as a matter of right. So I think from that point of view, the process, again I come back to the point, the process is far more important, these outcomes, when we start tracking these evidence and these programs. So finally I would like to end by just quoting, I really think Kofi Annan, when he said that gender equality is more than a goal in itself, and it is a precondition for meeting the challenge of reducing poverty, promoting sustainable development and building good governance, is something that we should really remember, that we are not working towards the empowerment of women and girls and marginalized communities only as a matter of an end in itself, but this needs to be a precondition for all other development rather than so we are all in a part of this movement where we are trying to, I think, use this strong lever to bring much bigger equity and social justice than just about men and women, and that's why men become so important part of this whole equation. I always go back to that point. So with these few words, I hope I made some sense. I'll be happy. There's no question and answer here, thankfully. But I would be happy to answer or interact some of the programs that we have been engaged with in India and many other countries of the South Asian region and also in Africa. And we'll be happy to share our experience working on these difficult issues in different age groups and with different communities and see what it means, where we are losing out, where we are gaining. So thank you very much for having us again, and hopefully this will be a sustained relationship with the TI. Thank you.